This is Vaughn Hansen from Washburn University, here to talk to you about the 2021 KMEA Timpani excerpts. The first etude that we have to deal with is number 10 from the Vic Firth Solo Timpanist. One of the things that pops up first is playing pianissimo on timpani. They're big drums. Not only does that mean they can be very loud, they can also be a very soft instrument, but they're very resonant. So we need to make sure that when we play the drums, we move with a very articulate stroke so everybody can hear each note of our rhythm and it's not just kind of a washy, sloppy sound. What I do to make that happen is I keep my sticks very low, keep my dynamic, but I also play with a pretty quick stroke. Sometimes when I'm playing big open strokes on timpani, I'm moving this way. When I'm playing soft, I'm moving pretty quick, grabbing the stick a little bit to make sure that I have control, and I'm keeping very low. Sounds like this. One thing that we really need to pay attention to in this introduction is the alternation between triple and duple time. A big place that this is apparent is in measures 5 through 7, where he starts with a triplet, and then we go into duple time for a few beats, another triplet on that beat 6. We're in duple for 3 more beats, and we go back to triple for 3 beats before finishing out in a bunch of triple meter in measure 7. To do this, I think of my triplets as being a little bit wider and my 16ths as being very sharp and tight. I'm thinking of playing those a little bit more articulate, change my stroke a little bit, and play slightly sharper on the duple on the 16th patterns to make sure that they're nicely well placed. But these are in my head all very thought out, so I'm thinking of all of these smaller partials. I'm not just kind of floating and placing these in place. I'm thinking of all the small partials in between. If I was to count this out loud, measures 5 and 6, I would think this: 1 polet, 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 5 polet, 6 polet, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 polet, 5 polet, 6 polet, 1. You can actually hear in measure 5 on the 5th beat, coming out of that duple into the triplet when I play the quarter note on beat 5, I count a triplet to set my brain up into playing that next triplet. It prepares me to play that. We need to make sure when we have these intricate triplet rhythms that we're playing on different partials, there's rests throughout. Sometimes there's a quarter in the middle of that bracketed triplet. We need to make sure that we're counting every triplet and placing them right in the correct place. For example, measure 9, there's lots of rests in here, but I'm counting every one of the notes in between. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Sometimes I go into, when I'm thinking of my triplets, I count them as 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, because it helps me really think about where they're placed rather than sometimes the syllable triplet. Something to notice there is when notes are equidistant. So when there is an 8th rest between each note, even though it's on odd partials. So in this bar, we have a group of 3, 1, 2, 3. Then we have those 2 rests. Then we have another group of 3. So they're kind of a call and response. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So those need to sound exactly rhythmically even. But then after that, we're going to play each of those next notes equidistant. So I'm on the 2nd triplet of the 3rd beat. So we have 1, 2, 3, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 are all equidistant, and then the next 3 are equidistant on beats 5 and 6. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. 1, 2, 3, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. If I can feel those as all equidistant, then I can really land in the right place. The last thing that I'm really paying attention to in this introduction is getting into the subito piano and still playing those 16ths articulate and not having it just be lost as kind of a washy notes on my top drum. To make this happen, I do a double left on the last 2 written triplets, so the 2nd and 3rd partial of beat 3, and then I'm able to start my Fs with my right hand, and I have a little bit more time since I just did a double. while these two are here, I'm able to get over here, and I don't have to jump over real quick to get that ready. That left hand he has written, I play on a right, and then I have to jump both hands over real quick, and I just can't get the articulation I want. So by changing that sticking and doing a double on the left, I can get over here and be set to play. I play a paradiddle on those 16ths, right, left, right, right, and then that sets me up with the 5-lit and then the 6-polet to end on my right hand, so then I'm set up for that next bar. That sticking really helps me out there. After the introduction, we really get into the body of this piece, which is measure 13, which feels like just a big, flashy tenor solo with all these crosses and shifts that he has written. I find these stickings to be suggested stickings from Vic Firth. I personally am not as much of a fan of the crossover or as many of the shifts as he is, so I have altered a lot of these stickings to work better for my hands. I find that doubles for me create a more consistent sound, and I can place my notes where I want them without shifting across drums real fast. My sound is much more consistent. I'm going to show you a few bars where I've changed some of these stickings so you can see what I have done here. Let's start with bar 13. I've changed this sticking, as you can see above. From what he has written, I have two groups of doubles instead of his shifts. He has shifts here. A shift is where you play two notes on a drum and you quickly move your hands over. So from beats 1 into 2, he has a shift. That is a shift where I have two notes here and then two notes here. At that quicker tempo, we really have to throw them up there. And so I have a little bit more consistency if I play a double here. So my sticking is a double across those bars. Let's talk about bar 19 real quick. He has some doubles written here. He also has some shifts and a cross sticking on beat 3. I'm avoiding those shifts and cross stickings by adding more doubles throughout here. You can see my sticking above here, and I'll play that and show you what that looks like on the drums. For me, just keeping this even and moving back and forth across the drums with the doubles creates more consistency. In bar 20, I do play my only crossover of this etude because I find it to be more efficient and cleaner than playing doubles here. He has a left, right cross written, which is fine. That works just fine. My hands like to start with the right a little bit more, so I'm playing a right, left, right, and then my cross is on the left at the end. So let's talk about crosses here, because some of you may choose to do some of these crosses throughout or some of the shifts and take more of his sticking. So let's talk about how to achieve a good cross sticking on the drums. So the main thing that we need to take care of is the hand that is crossing needs to stay as low as possible. If we get up high, once the stick comes down, we're playing with kind of the front edge of the mallet, and we're not getting the same sound. So that's a lot of times what happens. We get a bad sound there. So I'm trying to basically rub my arms across each other. Keeping your hands nice and low and moving between that keeps that really consistent. So if you're doing crosses, make sure you're focusing on that. Make sure if you're choosing to do crosses or you're choosing to do shifts or you're choosing to do doubles, that you're doing these because it is the most consistent and the best tone that you can make. Don't do it because it looks cool. First of all, there's going to be a screen in front of you at most of these auditions, and nobody's going to see what you're doing. But also, our musical choices should not be visual choices first. Our visual choices are in the background here. We're trying to make the most consistent musical sound. So you can choose the stickings that work best for your hands, which might not be the same as mine. I put a couple stickings up on the screen here. If you're interested to see what my stickings are for this entire etude. You can send me an email. You'll see my email at the end of this video. You can send me an email, and I'll be happy to send you those, and we can talk it over. We can have a lesson, figure out the best way for you to accomplish this section. The next thing that we need to pay attention to is measures 14 and 15 with the accents here. I want to make sure that I hear accents, but I also don't want to drop the other hands down so far that they don't match what I was doing before or after. So what I want to hear is a consistent dynamic at 14, and then on the third and fourth beat, I want that C to stay the same dynamic it was in the first two beats, and I'm going to bring up the height and a little bit more velocity to get the accents on the right hand, and then when we get to 16, the right hand needs to fall back down into the texture on the F. So we need to make sure that we're not continuing to play accents in measure 16. It's really apparent we want to hear those accents come, and then we want them to fade away. So really pay attention to that, hearing an even sound, and then we have the accents above, and then our sound is matching again, and not changing everything just because there are accents there. I do all my same stickings and articulations and the raising of the mallet for the accents when I'm in the piano dynamic. Just everything is much lower and a little bit sharper, more articulate motions to make sure that everything is really heard and doesn't just turn into a mushy blur. You have to make sure that you're really enunciating and speaking all the drum syllables across there so that we hear everything extremely clear and we can hear all the rhythms and it's not just a big mess. As we're going up into the final two bars, we get to go from piano into this huge fortissimo in one measure. So that's a big jump. It's a big change in stick height. Really have to be careful to not get so loud that you get splatty. We're coming up to fortissimo, but it needs to be still a good sound that we're producing throughout the drums so we're not playing through the drums and getting this nasty sound. One thing that we need to think about in this etude is the dampening. It's a little unclear where dampening should be because he puts in one little piece of information. At the start, after the first beat, he has the little tie off the last note, which in percussion we interpret as a let vibrate sign. We let the instrument ring. I personally interpret this to mean that everything is flowing together. We have perfect fourths between everything. The notes sound really nice together. There isn't really a lot of clash, so I don't have a problem with them ringing together. I don't do any dampening in this entire etude except for the last beat. Some other people might make some other decisions to make some rhythms more clear or just make musical decisions on where they want to dampen. That's perfectly fine. That's your choice to make. My interpretation is a little bit more open, but at the end, I really do like how there's all this density going on. We bring the dynamic up, and then really quickly, everything comes to an end, and the air is just sucked out of the room on beat 2 as we dampen. In order to make that work, I play that like this. Bar 24, the last beat, beat 4, we have 2 triplets, and then we have a downbeat, and they're all going up the drum. So I play the first note with my left hand, so this would be the second partial of the triplet. And then as I hit the last beat of that measure, I'm playing it with my right hand, and I do another right while I dampen with my left hand on the downbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4, pull at 1, 2. And then I'm dampening right on 2 here. And you'll kind of see me at the end, I dampen on 2, and then I'm making sure that everything is cleared out of the way because I just want to cut all that sound off. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4. Etude 11 is a lot more straightforward than Etude 10 was, and I'm not going to talk about too many specifics about this one. I would recommend you take the same ideas that I talked about with number 10, which are think about stickings that aren't written in, and you can change the stickings that are written there to make sure that everything flows well and works the best for your hand. If you're doing a cross, if you're doing a double, everything is about the best tone production and the most consistency. If you read the paragraph that Vic Firth writes on the page before, make sure you buy the book and you have the book for this. The composer writes a paragraph before each one of these and talks about it. He's talking about the ability to play at a mezzo forte dynamic and make that have a full sound without being harsh. If you look at the dynamics on this piece, it starts mezzo forte, we're going up into our forte sound and then to the fortissimo, and then back down to mezzo forte, and there's just a couple bars at the end that are down at a piano and below. So this is focusing on playing with our full sound and getting a good sound production without being splatty. So I think we can just talk about sound production and how hitting timpani without getting a splatty sound works. These drums are very large, and we think that we can just beat the snot out of them, but you really can't. They're actually some of our most sensitive instruments because of these large heads. If we play through them, it interrupts the vibration of the head, and we get that nasty, splatty sound. So we just want to play to the surface and play with a lifted stroke. It doesn't mean we have to do all this crazy stuff where we're bringing it up. What that means is we just need to not play through the surface of the drum. When we're hitting the drum, we need to just put little divots in the drum. If I'm playing my hand, it doesn't hurt. If I play through the drum, then it's hurting my hand a bit. I'm just trying to make contact and get out of the way so that I'm not playing splatty through the drum. That splatty sound is when we play through. So if you're thinking about that on the drum, just think about making contact with the surface and not playing through, and then you're just changing that stick height and the amount of volume you're putting in for each of those dynamics. Make sure you have a nice full mezzo forte, but you have to save room for that forte and fortissimo. So if you start this one too loud, you're not going to leave yourself room. So it can be a bit smaller mezzo forte, so you have room to get up into the forte and then the fortissimo and come back down and then disappear into the pianissimo. There are many more considerations on these etudes to think about, and if you want to dig into them deeper, if you have questions, if you want me to listen to you play, I'd be happy to write back and forth, answer questions. I'd love to do a lesson with anybody who wants to work on this material. Right at the end of this video, you'll see my email. Shoot me an email and I'll work with anybody who has the desire to make this better. Thank you.